And there is not a single Jewish person that at some point in his or her life didn't ask himself, what were the ordinary Germans doing while the annihilation of the Jewish people was taking place?
No one actually gives a shit. People enjoy knowing that they are suffering.
That Palestinians are Hamas,
Yeah,
that they want to kill us, that they want to throw us into the sea.
Do you know for how many years Israel is controlling and dictating the amount of calories that each Gazan is allowed to consume on a daily basis?
Can you see me?
No.
Okay, wait me a second. Can you see me now?
Oh, there you are. Yeah.
Sorry, that was just me being silly. I haven't used Zoom in a very long time, so I just... Okay, ready to go? Okay, I'm just gonna clap. Okay, good. There we go. Hi, good day, and welcome to another episode of Unapologetic. I'm your host, Ashraf Karim, and today joining me is Orly Noy, who's the chairperson of the board of Beit Salem. Orly, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Orly, I'm speaking to you because just a few days ago, Beit Salem released a report called Our Genocide, which is about Israel's actions in Gaza and extensively documents, I think, what most people seeing the show now would call a genocide and probably have been calling a genocide for a few months. So we're gonna go through some of those incidents that you highlight in your report. But I think the main discussion point is going to be about Israeli society, and it's going to be about trying to debunk the lies, the propaganda lies, the myths that kind of make this genocide likely and makes many people complicit and has allowed Israel to continue continue and to execute this genocide in the first place. So just to begin with, actually, before we get there, just you're an Israeli. You've been, your organization has been reporting on human rights abuses for decades. How do you feel about everything that's occurred that Israel has done in the last 22 months?
It's really beyond words to describe. I mean, I've been an activist for more than 2 decades, and I never had any faith in the Israeli system, in the Zionist regime. I thought I knew what it is capable of. I never imagined that we would find ourselves in days such as these. I am speechless and mortified by the magnitude and the cruelness and the viciousness of the Israeli crimes in Gaza. I have never been more ashamed in being a Jewish Israeli citizen than I am today.
Okay, I just want to before I get into what's, I just want to kind of, you've obviously been living in Israel, so you know what Israeli society and media have been saying. But there's a clip that we've kind of posted, which is of a podcast, which was put up about a week ago. I'm just going to play that for you. So let me know if you can see this.
Mm-hmm. No one actually gives a shit. 0 people in Israel, if you go up to them and you're like, do you care if this baby in Gaza gets polio? They'll be like, I don't fucking just.
Yariv Oppenheimer would care.
Yeah, okay. There'll be like 20 people who care, and they're all wearing Meretz shirts. Like, fuck them. But seriously, nobody would give a shit.
Yesterday we went to a concert.
Yeah.
In Erkon Park. We had lots of fun. Me and my girlfriend, Shalom Chanoch.
Wow.
We danced. And it was amazing, and you can't help but think like it's nice to know that you're dancing in a concert while hundreds of thousands of Gazans are,
homeless,
like sitting in a tent and eating.
Makes it even better.
Yeah,
more enjoyable concert. If only they put the live video footage of Gaza. Like, but seriously, you guys, like that. That's what people don't understand. Look, like, I know that you guys might be appalled by this, some of the listeners, but seriously, this is how Israelis feel. But you might think I'm extreme, but I have conversations with lots of people, coworkers, friends. People enjoy knowing that they are suffering.
So, I mean, how indicative of that is that, you think? Do you think that's just, these are 2 crazy people on the extremes of society, or do you think what they're saying, that no one actually gives a damn if people are dying of polio or people are dying of hunger, Do you think that's a accurate representation of Israeli society?
Even now listening to it, it really it's it's horrifying. But there is a lot of truth to that. I mean, I see those two young men. I don't know who they are, but obviously they are enjoying tremendously to speak about the Gazan suffering. And I'm not sure if this enjoyment necessarily represents the Israeli public, but the indifference for sure. The Israeli public is indifferent, is either completely ignorant, or to the extent that it is exposed to the situation in Gaza, it is quite indifferent to it. And we actually dedicate a big portion of our report in B'Tselem to the things that enable a genocide to happen. A genocide just doesn't happen overnight. It needs a certain conditions that have been created in Israel over decades, including the total dehumanization of Palestinians in general and of Gazans in particular, and the enhancement of deeply racist sentiments, the promotion of Jewish supremacy, etc. There is a list of preconditions that now allowing this genocide to take place. So this indifference to the suffering of Gazans is certainly one of them. And I think, yes, unfortunately, it is very much representing the Israeli public state of mind today.
Okay, so I just want to, before we move on, for the sake of our audience, I want to get to understand Beit Salim a bit more. I think many of us may not have 2 years ago or before October 7th heard of Beit Salim. Now it's all, I mean, many people are commenting about it. It's being used in these various arguments you have online between, people who are asking for the liberation of Palestine or recognition of Palestinian statehood, and people who are, sort of for the Israeli aggression. Beit Salim is always cited. Tell us about your organization, just very briefly. Just why do you exist? What kind of work have you been doing? And what is your involvement in the organization been?
So B'Tselem is probably the most prominent Israeli human rights organization, existing about 3 decades. And initially, the idea today, behind B'Tselem is today, it certainly sounds almost naive. The idea at the time was that the Israeli public is not aware enough or doesn't know enough about the violations of Palestinian human rights in the occupied territories. And if we just, document those violations and bring it to the attention of the Israeli public, then certainly they would be outraged and, they put an end to the occupation. Basically, that was like the very naive assumption at a time. So B'Tselem's primary work is to document such violations of Palestinian human rights in the occupied territories, in Gaza, in the West Bank, and in East Jerusalem. So we have, so it is an Israeli organization, but we have Palestinian field researchers. So it is an organization in which Palestinians and Israelis, both Palestinian Israelis and Jewish Israelis, and Palestinians from the occupied territories work together. Throughout the years, we became aware of the naivete behind that, concept, that way of thinking that if we that it's just enough to expose the Israeli public to those violations. There were, I will just mention 2 very important milestones in the work of B'Tselem. One was publishing the apartheid report, in which we actually said we recognize the Israeli regime between the river and the sea, including the 48 territories, as one apartheid regime. And we were explaining in depth why it is one regime and it is in fact an apartheid regime. And another very important milestone was to turn actually outwards, not just inwards towards the Israeli public, but also to the international arena, to a few appearances before the UN Security Council, starting to call upon the international community to do its obligation, interfere and stop the Israeli crimes. Of course, today, we already published a report that speaks about genocide. So as the reality keeps escalating, we are trying to adapt our work to the rapidly deteriorating reality.
You mentioned that when you started this 30 years ago, naively, you thought that you'll be able to speak to the morality of Israel society. But if you just had to shine a light, show them what's actually going on, because there was the disinformation and a lack of proper information coming out of the occupied territories, people would change their minds. And I guess it's a bit naive now, because people are aware. They may not be looking at the news all the time, and they may not be getting the same access to information as people outside of Israel or people exposed in the international world do. And I mean it speaks to the heart of fascism that you've created this organization. Hopefully there'll be some transparency, and if anything, the more brave and bold work B'Tselem has done, probably the more delegitimized you get in Israeli society. Has this been the trend? Have you noticed that as you do rigorous reporting and come up with a report, you're probably libeled in the society and slurred against? How has that been?
Oh, the way the Israeli establishment treats B'Tselem is an incredible indicator for the process that this society is going through. Because I still remember, I've been on the board of B'Tselem for about 10 years, and I've been the chairperson for the last 3 years. I remember a time when the Israeli government actually was waving B'Tselem as a proof for how democratic Israelis, was actually bragging, using B'Tselem as this fig leaf to brag about Israeli democracy. And it was something that the Israeli government was using in pride to show just what a wonderful democracy Israel is. Then a new phase began, especially after we started talking more directly with the international community and after the appearances in the Security Council. They started to incite against us very viciously, including a very personal campaign against the previous general director of B'Tselem, to the extent that we had to hire bodyguards for him. And it was by the most official, people in the Israeli government. And so there was a very brutal, very violent campaign started against B'Tselem and other human rights organizations. And the third, but now we are even not in that phase anymore. We are in a phase where they completely ignore us. And I think that, it also points to the depths of fascism in which we are. They are targeting our funds. There is a very long list of legislations in different, that are going through the process of basically limiting our abilities to recruit funds in order to shut us down through our pockets. But other than that, publicly, they don't even bother anymore to incite against us. They just completely disregard us. We are not part of the public discourse anymore. We used to be. People used to, to react. If B'Tselem said something, people used to react. Today, we are just completely, we became completely irrelevant to the total fascist state in which Israel is at right now.
Okay, so I wanna start dealing with your report, and I mean I read a bit of it last night, and I've read the summaries and everything else, obviously, and we've been covering this genocide since it began on October 8th, and just reading if you just go through this, and I'm going to read some of it now. I'm just going to read some of the contents pages. Actually, it's a reminder of, because many people, even in the Western media now, and even Western leaders are now saying now that Israel has created a situation where there's no buildings left in Gaza, almost no buildings. There's very few hospitals, barely working, barely operational. People are lining up. They have to walk sometimes 10, 12 kilometers. It's August, it's 30 degrees out there, often without shoes. And then they may get aid or they may get shot. And now people are like, this is bad and this is a genocide. And when you just read the contents, it kind of reminds you of everything that's occurred. So I'll just killing and causing serious bodily and mental harm. And then the subheadings, there are airstrikes, open fire regulations and kill zones, wounded persons and lack of medical treatment, indirect death, psychological trauma. If you go further down the contents page, destruction of living conditions, starvation and destruction of food infrastructure, destruction of electricity and water infrastructure, destruction of living conditions, economic destruction. And we forget that throughout this 20-month period, it's just been destruction over destruction, extremely systematic. And you get that just by reading the contents page. And then, you come to the last part where, well, almost the last section, where you speak about forced displacement, the spread of anarchy, the assault on the family unit, the assault on education, which obviously comes as a result of the complete destruction, interference with press coverage, and we can go on and on. So over this next section, in order to talk about what you have in the report, I want to do so in a way that I said in the start, where we're going to kind of sort of do some debunking of myths, right? Because all of these, the ability for Israel to create all of this destruction has been built on a lie. And I think the first lie, or the first misnomer, is this nomer of Israel has a right to self-defense.
Yeah.
How that's been used as the premise, the first premise for everything that you now document in this report.
Since the establishment of the State of Israel, the claim for self-defense was the thing that Israel always hid behind, and what was the thing that allowed that the international community used as a lip service to allow Israel to do these continuous crimes. So it's not something new that Israel would do the most horrifying crimes in the name of self-defense. It was we warned against that already on October 8th. Because we knew that this Israeli pattern to abuse, the claim of self-defense in order to carry out crimes, and we already knew where it was heading on October 8th, and we warned against it. Do not allow Israel to use this claim of self-defense in order to commit unspeakable crimes in Gaza, which unfortunately it did.
I think one of the you're right. That was I think one of the first things that Israeli spokespeople, or unfortunately many Western commentators and Western journalists would say also, almost in defense, almost sometimes before the Israeli spokesperson would even say that, we know you have a right to self-defense, when in fact an occupier doesn't. That's just international law. But I think the second.
And also, I must, we also self-defense against whom?
Yes, against whom?
Against whom? The children that that are starving to death. Who is threatening Israel right now? It's absurd. It's such an absurd claim.
So I mean, it's interesting that you say that against whom, because obviously most of the images we see are not of Hamas fighters being killed, but of children and women. But then there's this other myth, right, which is Hamas is in the population. Hamas is using the population as human shields. They're in the hospitals. They're using, centers. They're using mosques and they're using schools as these centers of for their operations. And that's allowed the destruction, right? So speak
Yeah.
again to that myth and just how they've used that myth to create the destruction that you document in Betsalim's report.
So there are 2 points I would like to make about in that regard. One is, let's for 1 minute not speak about Hamas and actually speak about the Israeli military facilities. In the 12 days war against Iran, Iran hit several targets at the heart of Israeli, cities. We know that most of them were security facilities. Where is the headquarters of the Israeli army? Where are they at? They are at the heart of the most populated city in Israel. They are at the heart of Tel Aviv, the headquarters of the Israeli army. So and we can go on to hospitals, Israeli hospitals, how they collaborate, with the Israeli army, to Israeli universities, how they collaborate with the Israeli army. So if there is, if this is a valid claim, then it goes both ways. But going back to Hamas, I also work as a journalist for 972 magazine. One of the main researches that we published was that actually Israel does not only the Israeli army is not trying to avoid targeting Hamas members while they are, they are with their families. They actually, the system is such that it locates Hamas members, and by the way, it can also be civilian Hamas members, while they are at home with families. It means that the Israeli army is actually waiting for Hamas members or other targets, as they may be, to be at their homes with their families in order to target them. This system that locates them while they are with their families is called "Where is Dad? When Baba?" This is the name of the of this search system that the army uses, the program that locates the targets while they are at their homes. So it's not that that the Israeli claim that we don't have a choice because they hide behind inside civilians is actually completely false. Israel is not targeting those people when they are outside their homes. The army is waiting for them to be in their houses with their families, and then it targets them. And of course, the army already approved collateral damage of almost non-restricted, and this is partially it explains partially, at least, the horrifying number of civilians killed in each explosion. So this is, of course, a complete lie, and Israel actually prefers to target them when they are among civilians in their houses with their families.
I think an important distinction to make is that obviously people aren't living in homes, they're living in sort of apartment buildings. And so when an airstrike comes, their family may be anything from 4 to 10 people in their actually 2 or 3 bedroom apartment. But then in the building, there's 100 people, 200 people sometimes, or 60, but huge amounts. And this is why we saw those very big death tolls in the first sort of 2, 3, 4, 5 months of the war. And it's just gone on and on and on. The other thing is that, if you speak to like a 12-year-old and you say, I'm using you as a human shield, the image you'll get is of a hostage. It's someone
Yeah.
takes you and puts a gun by your head and walks around with you, or what you've documented and human rights have documented, what the Israelis do with Palestinians all the time, have been doing since before the first Intifada, where they take a Palestinian and they tie them to a tank, or they physically take
Yeah.
and they enter a place to do an operation. It's not, being embedded in the population, and it's now taken for granted because the language has just become that this is human shield, and actually it's just you are a guerrilla movement embedded in the population, which is very different, which is still problematic, but it's just a very different thing to being human shield.
Yeah. And yeah, no, it's Israel throughout the years sort of built up an entire parallel human language or non-human language, so that in which everything actually means the opposite of what this concept means in the language of humans. It's like, let's go back for a moment to the point of self-defense that you mentioned. You know that in the West Bank, the army can shoot at children, at Palestinian children, because of they claim they threw stones at an army jeep, which is it's all iron, and if a 5-year-old throws a stone, it's not it doesn't put really the soldiers in any. So it's like they are using the same words as the human language, but then it means something completely else, and quite frequently completely the opposite of what these terms, because self-defense is an important notion in the international law. It is an important notion, but the way Israel manipulated and completely twisted the meaning of this concept, among other things, brings us to the moment where we are at. So they are bombing those huge buildings because there is one person that they want to target, killing dozens of civilians, and then they claim to self-defense. This is not, I mean, it's a parallel language. It's not the language of human beings anymore.
The next sort of, the talking point is actually laughable. If I mention this talking point, but it's the idea that Israel is the most moral army in the world, and before, obviously, we respond to that because it's absolutely laughable, and it always has been. But those people like the Ben Shapiros and Douglas Murrays of the world, and I'm sure many Israeli talking heads would say that,
Yeah.
of course we're moral. Look what the US have done to Nagasaki and Hiroshima. They dropped atomic bombs. The idea of bombing Dresden, the Allied bombing of Dresden in World War II is often cited. And again, it's that you had the right to do that, so we now have the right to do this. Not to mention that all the conventions to stop that kind of thing happened precisely because of what happened in World War II.
Yeah.
But there's this notion also that they're very moral, that they're targeting, and again, it's created this. And honestly, in the first few weeks of the war, when I saw this being used as justification, it was very chilling because it gave you the sense that this is what they want to do. Except that they were also saying it. We want to go and annihilate. This is going to be Amalek. But when people not associated with the government started using that kind of argument, it was very clear that you are going to see an apocalyptic kind of war and operation. Just what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so this notion that the IDF is the most moral army in the world, this is something that the Israelis take a great deal of pride for since ever. This is not, that this is almost the second name of the Israeli army, the most moral army in the world. But let's we spoke about manipulating the language. Again, it's the most moral army in the world. So what Israelis bring as proof for the Israeli army being the most moral army in the world right now in Gaza, the GHF, and you will hear this in almost every discussion in panels on the Israeli television, in the newspapers. The claim is this: what other army would feed the enemy during war. And the fact that we are feeding the enemy as they fight us proves that this is the most moral army in the world. And here the discussion would end, not showing the Israelis what is actually happening in those concentration camps built around those, the GHFs, and what happens and how starving people are being lured into those death camps and just bombed to their deaths because starving people were looking for a little food. They will not tell the Israeli public how they eliminated any power that could actually function to orderly distribute the very little aid that does enter Gaza, such as UNRWA, which was really the only power that was able to do that, was able to bring in and to monitor the distribution of the aid. And now you have those gangs of Abu Shabab and his allikes, because the civilian system of the Hamas is also not functioning anymore. Israel is very openly collaborating with those gangs that their sole aim is to create chaos in the Gaza Strip. And all of this is somehow wrapped and presented to the Israeli public as the deeds of the most moral army in the world. Because so.
Yeah. No, I mean, and I mean, you mentioned that they've eliminated all sorts of power and they've eliminated UNRWA. And again, more myths. And I mean, you've kind of dispelled them already, but, UNRWA is Hamas was a myth they created so that they could then destroy the aid infrastructure. I mean, one of the other myths was, we left Gaza in 2005 and Hamas built tunnels and ran the place down. And now we can all do this. This is why. And then the other one is Hamas steals the aid when in fact, the Israeli generals have now admitted in the last few weeks that this has never been happening. There's no proof of this in any substantial way. And more importantly, that in fact they've been empowering, and this was also admitted by various members of the Knesset, that they've been empowering thugs that have ISIS affiliation, and they've been creating chaos. But I mean, the even taking away UNRWA and taking away the fact that they are arming the thugs, it's eliminating power doesn't really capture. And Normal Finkelstein said this to a colleague of mine. They were speaking about this, and honestly, he said, when you try to capture what's going on now, we no longer can capture this in reports. It now belongs in the area of fiction, in novels. When you consider that most people in Gaza right now probably haven't had anywhere to bathe, anywhere to actually relieve themselves in a normal way, no place to cook food. Often just now eating raw flour or whatever aid arrives away from their homes. It's actually completely unimaginable. And when you think about this, 9-10 months into the war, there was a ceasefire, and then they went home to their rubble homes, and there was a celebration. Maybe we'll have our rubble homes and we'll try to rebuild. And then Israel, of course, moved them around and moved them more around until they're all now stuck really in places where there isn't much infrastructure. And has systematically, and this is often underreported because it's been going on for so long, and because usually it's like right now, if they kill 100 people at an aid distribution point, that will be reported. But on the same day, there are thousands of Israeli soldiers and contractors leveling homes. And this has been going on, and completely, homes that are already leveled, just moving the rubble. And it's very, very, very dystopian. And I think at the core of all of this is the dehumanization myth, right? That Palestinians are Hamas, that they want to kill us, that they want to throw us into the sea, and just what's your thoughts on that? Yeah.
No, for sure, and it's a dehumanization for such a long time. I sometimes I have conversations with Israelis, or not that we're mainstream Israelis, and they are not like right wingers necessarily, but but they say, well, what could we have done? October 7th was such a terrible, and it's awful, but this is what we have to do. And then I asked them, do you know for how many years Israel is controlling and dictating the amount of calories that each Gazan is allowed to consume on daily basis? Do you know for how many years Israel is controlling how many calories is a Gazan allowed to consume every day? This is something that Israel dictates. What if parsley is allowed to enter, or cilantro? This is something that Israel is controlling. If what kind of snacks the Gazan children were allowed to have is something that Israel is dictating for years. We just published today, and I didn't. It's amazing. 10 years ago, more than a decade ago, there was a public opinion survey that asked Israelis a hypothetical situation. You have an Israeli soldier captured in a building in Gaza, and in order to save that soldier, you need 1,000 Gazans will need to be killed. Almost all the Israelis that participated said yes, of course. So they're willing to sacrifice thousands of Gazans. The dehumanization didn't start on October 7th. And this is something that, Israelis, for Israelis, the history itself began on October 7th. But there was an October 6th. And of course, there's been an October 8th and since. But this is something that, we should bear in mind, the dehumanization of Gazans. I remember the Great March of Return. I remember how snipers, week after week, were sitting in front of barefoot civilians, just making a declaration in front of the fence, and snipers shooting them down one by one. No danger, they were barefoot people. I remember that. And week after week, and they were bragging about it, and they had a contest of how many kneecaps each sniper took in his shift. And they would compare notes, and there was a contest. These did not start on October 7th. There was something for such a long time, something so horrifying, so much beyond words that was going on here. And we were living our normal life, and the world never, turned a blind eye. As this is a question that I can guarantee you, as a Jewish person, there is not a single Jewish person that at some point in his or her life didn't ask himself, what were the ordinary Germans doing while the annihilation of the Jewish people was taking place? Every Jewish person at some point asked this question. Today, we are living the answer. And the answer is not one thing, not a single thing. They just live their normal life as Jews were burned to death in the extermination camps. Exactly like we are living today our normal lives as Gazans are being annihilated in the genocide that Israel is inflicting upon them.
You mentioned, thanks for your very strong words. You're speaking about sort of the inability of the Israeli society to act or to do anything or to look away. There was a very famous Haaretz poll done probably about 2 months ago now. 82% of Israeli Jews who they surveyed wanted to see everyone in Gaza move to another country, completely ethnic cleansed. 56% wanted to see, what they call Arab Israelis, Palestinians living in Green Line, Israel. Wanted all of them to go. That's about 18% of the Israeli population. They wanted them all moved to other countries. And I think the most shocking statistic was 47% believed that every place which the Israeli, army conquers, which is Gaza because they've conquered it, and effectively can be the West Bank because it's very easy for the Israeli army. I mean, this whole place is under occupation anyway, but I mean, they will say that Area C maybe isn't occupied, right? But I mean, that's very scary because the idea is that there it's 47% believe that every single inhabitant, from a 0-year-old child until everyone, should be killed. How but again, this is something that the brain can't comprehend. And I don't want to make any comparisons because all evil's bad, and even World War II was really, really, really horrible. But I'm not even sure if German society would have been polled like that. Just again, some of your thoughts behind that.
Yeah, I honestly don't know why the world hasn't been listening when Israeli officials said those words way before October 7th. I don't know why the world never took them seriously. One of the most powerful politicians today, the Minister of Finance, Bezalel Smotrich, started his appearance in the Israeli politics with a very elaborate plan that he called the decisive plan, which is basically the final solution, that presents three options to the Palestinians. You either leave, or you accept to our dominance, Israeli dominance, or if you choose to stay and you do not accept the Israeli supremacy and live, under as subjected to the Israeli ruling, then the third option is annihilation. So this is what has been, implemented. This is what is implemented in Gaza, basically. But Smotrich said it many, many years ago. So I don't know why the world is surprised when those people got the power. They implement, they implement their plans. They came with those plans. So it's not, it's not surprising. Regarding the West Bank, I must say one of the points that we and it's a warning with red flags in our report, the genocide report of B'Tselem, is that this genocide that is happening today, right now in Gaza, can easily spread into the West Bank, given the slightest provocation or incentive or excuse. At the very same day that we published the genocide report, one of the most courageous, noble, beloved persons, and he was he was dear to many of us, an amazing activist from El Khair in Musafir Yatta area, Aude Hadalin, was shot dead by Inon Levy, who is a well-known thug settler. Even the United States in the previous administration put sanctions on him. He's and this was like in front of the cameras. This is documented from 20 different angles. He shot him dead. He is now a free man. Aude's body is still in army's custody, along with 7 residents of El Khair. They are arrested. And this murderer is walking around and threatening people again as a free man. The genocide can spread to the West Bank very easily. It should be stopped, and the world has the responsibility. Way too late, but there are still over 2 million people in Gaza to save. And there are millions of people in the West Bank to save. And it's really, there are no more words to express how urgent it is to stop Israel and to do whatever it takes to stop this genocide from continuing and spreading to the West Bank.
Another sort of myth, right? And you've kind of touched on it when you said they used to kind of use Beit Salim as proof that there's democracy in Israel, etc. There's a big idea. I mean, many people who from prominent journalists to Western leaders believe that if you get rid of Netanyahu, Smotrich, and Ben Gvir, then this all goes away. And I'm sure maybe in its radicalism or the acceleration, it kind of goes away, maybe. Right, but just tell me why that's a myth and that's just wishful thinking.
It's certainly a myth. I mean, I should say that I personally believe that this Nazi government should be removed. I mean, that this is this government of annihilation, of genocide. They cannot. I mean, that this is a moral obligation to overthrow this genocidal government. But the alternative is certainly not democracy. We had proof of that, for a very brief period. We've had this the government of change, it was called at the time, by Bennett and Lapid, and this was the dream government of every sort of liberal Zionist, leftist Zionist, the anti-Netanyahu camp. They all came together. It included even Meretz, which is like the most left on the Zionist spectrum. They were in this government. And it turned out that this government, up until, of course, up until this genocide, but it was the deadliest government to Palestinians in decades. And eventually, it dispersed itself in order to protect the apartheid regulations in the West Bank. Nobody overthrew this government. They dispersed themselves. There was a situation in which the right wing would have, voted against it, and in order to save the apartheid regime in the West Bank, they actually preferred to disperse the government and to protect the apartheid regulations in the West Bank. So we've had this experience. Nobody can say that we didn't have it. We know what the Zionist alternative looks like. So by this point, I think it should be very clear to any true democratic, moral human being that the alternative to the genocide cannot be found within the Zionist spectrum, and that the problem is not specifically with this government or another, but with the regime of supremacy. The regime that is established on Jewish supremacy cannot produce democracy. This is contradiction in terms. This is, the supremacist regime cannot produce democracy, no matter who sits at the head of the table.
Orly, I know you have to go quite soon, so we have a few more minutes, so I'm going to use that. Thank you for your time again. Just the last myth that I kind of want you to speak about, and then we'll deal with some closing things. But the last myth is this idea that criticizing Israel is anti-Semitic. Tell me why that's such a dangerous myth.
I really thank you for this question, because this may be the most sensitive thing to me. Again, as a Jewish person, I was born in Iran and I grew up in Iran, and we immigrated to Israel, following the Islamic Revolution. So I was Jewish before I was Israeli, and I will die a Jewish person. I will not necessarily die as an Israeli. I don't know. But one thing I know for sure as a Jewish person, what does anti-Semitism mean? It means excluding Jews as a collective from the norms of humanity. And the exemption that, allowing Israel to do unhuman crimes because it is a collective of Jews, so it has like different rules applying to them, to Israel. Exempting Israel from the norms of humanity is nothing short of anti-Semitism. This is the essence of anti-Semitism, to say that the human norms, the human morality, they do not apply to Israel. This is anti-Semitism. So, saying that you shouldn't criticize Israel, they are allowed to be unhuman, they are allowed to be immoral. I cannot think of a more accurate definition of anti-Semitism than this.
I mean, we've spoken a lot about your report. We haven't even scratched the surface, quite honestly. I think people who really should go and read the reports themselves. I know you have spoken to a colleague of mine, and you mentioned, because I mean, the question was, why have you taken so long to do the report? And yes, you could have done it a long time ago, and people have been calling it, but it was a matter of reporting and actually getting everything in there, and for the historical record, and so it wasn't to be urgent. I want to take your comments on that, but okay, I'll take your comments on that, and then I'll get to the concluding question.
Yeah, sure. I mean, for sure, it could have been published a long time ago. There is no doubt about that. I want to say a few things about it. First, research takes time, and it's a very thorough research, and B'Tselem's reports are always based on a very, very thorough investigation, it's not just a declaration. It's a research, and research takes time, and we want to be on very solid ground when we come out and say this is genocide. And a second thing is that, it's not like B'Tselem was silent until this report came out. We are very active and very outspoken since the beginning of this annihilation war. So there was no question never where we stood as an organization. And, it's I think it's very similar to the apartheid report that we published several years ago. It's not that, we thought, okay, from this moment on, Israeli regime became an apartheid. And, of course, also the apartheid report could have been published years ago, decades ago, in fact. So there's not a moment in time when reality becomes a genocide or reality becomes an apartheid. But again, we do take this criticism very seriously. And of course, this report could have been published a long time before it was. But it's not like we sat silent until that moment. And we wanted to come out with a very solid research when we did.
Absolutely. I think that's completely understandable. I think the merit of the idea that the research has to be really solid is important. The final sort of idea and question, and it may be two questions, but it's about sustainability and it's about the future. It's very difficult to imagine how Gaza, what it returns to, if it returns to anything. I think most of us don't want to say this, but we probably have thought that maybe there will be a Gaza, unfortunately, where Palestinians are ethnically cleansed, or those who are remain in similar conditions to what they're living right now, where they are completely dependent on aid, on the worst kind of aid, and are often risking life to get aid, as in terms of actual education facilities and sanitary facilities. I don't even know how and when that's going to be set up, right? And there needs to be so much international pressure for the Israelis to do that it's a bit inconceivable. I mean, the world surprises us, and there's always miracles that occur, and we hope for that, but it almost seems inconceivable. So that's one aspect. And then the other aspect is, I mean, you mentioned it. You said you came to Israel as an Iranian Jew just after the Islamic Revolution in 1979. So I guess you see this differently from Israelis who have been born there and who moved there immediately after 1948 and have been there now for 2 or 3 sort of generations. but this will now always be part of Israel's legacy. And and more than that, if there can be something more than that, the current people who exist in Israel, the 47% who have said what they said in the Haaretz poll, what kind of Israel is this going to be?
I will start with this question. This is without a doubt a stain that would never be removed and could never be washed. And it's on all of us. On all of us. And I know that I will bear this shame until the day I die. And because, it's still happening. I don't think that we fully understand this moment in history, this moment in time. And we are very focused on ending it as we should be, but there will be a moment or many moments for it to start to sink in. What have we done? And what is this burden of shame that we'll be carrying on for the rest of our lives? This is something that will take a lot of time to digest and to understand, but for sure that just even today, it's very shameful to say you're Israeli when you go abroad. But the name Israel will be associated with the genocide for the rest of our existence. And this is something that we will have to deal with. And in that sense, it doesn't matter even if you supported or if you oppose. The shame is on all of us, and the stain is on all of us, and it's on Judaism itself, and this is something that we will need to carry, this burden that the descendants of the survivors of last decade's Holocaust, really, they did it. They committed the Holocaust of their own. This is something that, regarding the future of Gaza, it's very difficult to imagine. And if the word future doesn't sit with the apocalyptic images that we see of Gaza. But one thing is certain, that this future is for the Palestinians to decide, and the world that was not there to stop the genocide must be there to bring life back into Gaza and to make it a place once again for life to prosper and for Palestinian lives to prosper. And and this time, for God's sake, allowing the Palestinians to be the masters of their own fate and of their own future. If that lesson is not learned after this Holocaust of our time, then really it says something beyond terrifying about the human nature and about, humanity in general. I really hope that, that what was done already, it cannot be reversed. But there is still a lot to be done. First of all, stopping the genocide, but then really doing everything humanly possible to bring back life to Gaza Strip. This is the mission of humanity after the genocide.
Orly Noy, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for Beit Salim and your leadership of the board of Beit Salim and the contributions that Beit Salim has made over the decades. We at Middle East Eye use your reporting all the time, so it's very useful to us. But it's obviously very useful to the world. But most importantly, it's useful to the many victims who you write about. And so thank you for your time, and I wish you the best.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you.